Good evening. It's good to be here. It's good to be here with this, shall I call you, the community of practice of public administration and management. Can I be a bit, well, let me just be me. Can everybody move forward so that we don't have the gaps at the front? There's no special seats for anyone at the front if we just come forward. So good evening, everyone. It gave me an opportunity to at least open my laptop. So thanks for giving me that opportunity as well. I'd want to firstly thank you for the honor to do the Professor Stan Nkomo annual lecture. I am particularly honored because I think that Prof is associated with the foundation stones of public administration and governance and of our democracy. So thanks for the consideration. You think it needs the connection? We're not sure whether it's because I removed it or whether it's just whether it's technology letting us down. So tonight I've been asked to speak to the topic of government of the people, for the people. The fourth industrial revolution belongs to them. Interesting topic. It comes at an interesting moment as well. Government of the people, for the people. And the question arose in my mind when I looked at the second part. The fourth industrial revolution belongs to them. It's who is them? Is it government? Is it the people? Or is the emphasis, as correctly stated, government of the people, for the people? So I'll go with that. So here we meet this evening, days after South Africa's national elections, and you were all part of it, or you commented on it, or you are still reflecting on this election, the nature of it, the campaign, the turnout, the voter turnout, what are the lessons to be learnt, what are the messages to the political parties, are we a maturing democracy, and so it goes on. The question also could arise that as we look at the theme of the fourth industrial revolution and the use of technology and artificial intelligence, I think one big issue that came out of this election is the need for us to use technology in elections and ensure that it is linked up in such a way that whether you vote in KwaMashu or you vote in Lusikisiki or even in other far-flung areas, it should make no difference, because it will immediately register in every voting station or any voting station across the country as to whether you voted or not, so that we don't have various claims on whether this is indeed a free and fair election, and whether the government that comes out of it, at least the elected representatives, are of the people, for the people, whatever our political views may be as at a given point in time. So today, as we meet here, we are looking at the whole issue, and I want to start out with a quote as I reflect on the Fourth Industrial Revolution. A quote that comes from the World Economic Forum on the Fourth Industrial Revolution. And I proceed with it, stating that previous industrial revolutions liberated humankind from animal power, made mass production possible, and brought digital capabilities to billions of people. This fourth industrial revolution is, however, fundamentally different. It is characterized by a range of new technologies that are fusing the physical, digital, and biological worlds, impacting all disciplines, economies, and industries, and even challenging the ideas about what it means to be human. The resulting shifts and disruption mean that we live in a time of great promise and great peril. The world has the potential to connect billions more people to digital networks, dramatically improve the efficiency of organizations, and even manage assets in ways that can help regenerate the natural environment, potentially undoing the damage of previous industrial revolutions, close quotes. So we could argue if we use Dickens's Tale of Two Cities, that it is the best of times, but it could be the worst of times. We are also living on a continent that has the largest population of youth. So we have what is either the youth burden through the youth bulge or the youth dividend. We also live in a country, and we are in South Africa, that is projected to have the highest levels of income inequality, inequality in society as well. So can we use this fourth industrial revolution, can we use artificial intelligence to overcome these challenges, and what does this mean? So I did quite some reading to look at this, and I'm going to be a little bit provocative tonight, with some help, I would argue. Help that will reflect on some of the grave concerns that have been there, and Schwab of the World Economic Forum had also articulated this, that organizations may be unable to adapt, and that governments could fail to employ and regulate new technologies to capture their benefits. Shifting power will create important new security concerns. Inequality may grow, heaven forbid, because we can't go further than we have, and societies could fragment. So this is the reality that we're confronting. So how do we deal with this particular issue? What should we consider as we move forward during this period? And I address a community tonight that should actually be grappling with the detail of this challenge, grappling with it, because you must be the disruptors in both the academic in academia and in the public sector as practitioners to look at how we're going to turn this around. You don't have an option, because if you don't do that, you become obsolete. If SAPAM doesn't take on this challenge, SAPAM will become obsolete, because there's a need to look at how we can look at the opportunity that's there. So I'm going to go to the Constitution and make a reference to the Constitution, and I will predictably go to Section 195 of the Constitution, the basic values and principles governing public administration. And allow me to repeat it tonight, and you probably know it like the back of your hand, but I've got the mic, so I'm not dropping it at this point, and I'm going to raise these particular issues. And so under Section 195(1), it says public administration must be governed by the democratic values and principles enshrined in the Constitution, and that's important, including the following principles. A high standard of professional ethics must be promoted and maintained. Efficient, economic and effective use of resources must be promoted. Public administration must be development-oriented. Services must be provided impartially, fairly, equitably, and without bias. And this is very important. Very, very important. And I think it's important not only for public servants, but also for the elected officials, for the legislators, for our new cabinet, for our premiers, because it's important for them to take this into account. And public administration must be accountable. And so it goes on. It talks about transparency, and I'm going to come back to that. It talks about good human resource management. It also says that public administration must be broadly representative of the South African people, with employment and personnel management practices based on ability, objectivity, fairness, and the need to redress the imbalances of the past to achieve broad representation. So this is what our Constitution says. And it says that this must apply to administration in every sphere of government. It must apply to all organs of state and to public enterprises. And sometimes this is forgotten. And it's even forgotten by us, those of us who form part of what I wish to this evening call a community of practice of public administration. So why do I raise this? As we talk about the fourth industrial revolution, and as I talk about artificial intelligence, it's precisely because, and I want to go to the statement that President Nelson Mandela made when he was inaugurated on the 10th of May 1994. He said, "The time has come for the healing of the wounds. The moment to bridge the chasms that divide us has come. The time to build is upon us," close quotes. And we're again at a moment of building. And the chasm this time is not just a chasm about a racial and demographic divide. We're going to have a larger chasm. And it's going to be the chasm that may make gods and men, and I use men in, I'm not going to use the word gender neutral, because it's not gender neutral, but it's using using the term men in accommodating both women and men. And we are going to look at how we will use this moment to actually overcome the chasm. How are we going to do so? So I go to a book by author Yuval Noah Harari. I'm sure many of you read his book on Sapiens. His third book is called Lessons for the 21st Century. And as I looked at the days after elections, Harari says, and it's not the Harare, the city, capital of Zimbabwe, he's also an academic. He says, and I quote, both politicians and voters are barely able to comprehend the new technologies, let alone regulate their explosive potential. Since the 1990s, the internet has changed the world probably more than any other factor. Yet the internet revolution was directed by engineers more than political parties, close quotes. And I think this is something that not only we as this community of practice should think about, but I think that's something that the executive and the new government should take to heart as well. He goes further to ask the question, and it's a question we could ask ourselves tonight as well. Did you ever vote about the internet? The democratic system is still struggling to understand what hit it, and is hardly equipped to deal with the next shocks, such as the rise of artificial intelligence and blockchain revolution. And on finance, as the artificial intelligence improves, we might soon reach a point where no human can make sense of finance anymore. What will that do to the political process? Can you imagine a government waits humbly for an algorithm to approve its budget or its new tax reform? Meanwhile, peer-to-peer blockchain networks and cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin may completely revamp the monetary system so that radical tax reforms will be inevitable. For example, it might become impossible or irrelevant to tax dollars because transactions will not involve a clear-cut exchange of national currencies or any currency at all, close quotes. So I thought I should raise that to just trigger the thought. And some of us may say this is far-fetched. And you know, I'd want to say tonight it's not that far-fetched. When I was at Harvard in the fall of 1994, and the whole question of the internet was raised, and the need for everyone to have an email address, I, with great confidence in the first session when this was discussed by a group of disruptors, I said that's not quite relevant for us in South Africa and sub-Saharan Africa. And I was so wrong. I am so embarrassed. Because then, when I became Minister for Welfare, and we decided to go for biometrics, there were many who said, no, the gogos, the grandmothers and grandfathers, won't be willing to use a card. And what happened? Those very gogos trusted that card more than the grandchild that would put in the number. The reality of the internet is that everyone is using the internet. And indeed, as stated by Harari, we didn't vote on the use of the internet. And you would still sadly have some politicians saying proudly, when involved in either commissions or panels of inquiry, I don't know if something was hacked because I barely know how to open my computer. It's not something to be proud of. It actually reflects quite negatively on caliber of leadership in a world when we need leadership that will be open to the change in order to look at how we can optimize the potential of this moment in such a manner that we can deal and overcome inequalities in our society, that we can actually confront the issue on what we do with this youth bulge, understanding that not every youth will necessarily be employed as we understand it. What are we going to do about it? So I'll pause on that and just deal with a different matter. And I will come back to this particular point again. And here I want to jump to a global level. And I want to take you to the Sustainable Development Goals. Because again, as we talk about AI, as we talk about looking at technology and its uses, we also need to look at what is the greatest or the largest and most ambitious social compact that has been adopted, mind you, by heads of state globally, and that is the Sustainable Development Goals. And I'm not going to talk about all of them and about the details of this compact. I want to narrow down on one. And the particular one that I want to focus on is SDG 16. And it's a SDG that each and every one of us in this community of practice should be alive to. Because at the end of the day, its attainment rests on your involvement in and with this. You're making this a part of the work that you engaged in, whether it's in the public sector, as a practitioner, or as an academic researcher, or in the private sector in order to see its attainment, or even in academia. And I will come back to the detail of that, but what I want to raise is the fact that in the current life I'm involved, current life and work I'm involved in, I also serve as a member of committee of experts of public administration. And I'm one of 24 across the world who come together once a year and reflect on this particular goal. The goal looks at promoting peaceful and inclusive societies for sustainable development, providing access to justice for all, and building effective and accountable inclusive institutions at all levels. At our last meeting, on the 8th to the 12th of April 2019, one of the papers presented looked at enhancing the capacity of the public sector in a fast-changing world for the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals. And in that paper, it looked particularly at new technologies and the public sector. And it recognized that technology has become one of the most important factors in determining possibilities in the field of development. It also recognized that it's one of the most disruptive factors that may affect governments and societies, and that a successful transition to the fourth industrial revolution now depends on the proliferation of technology and how the process is managed. Governments that have the expertise to foresee how new technologies can be used to make public policies and services more effective, inclusive, and accountable have an advantage over those who do not. Similarly, Governments with such expertise often have the capacity to protect their citizens from the potential harm caused by or from the negative externalities of technologies. They are quick to initiate the sandboxing of new technologies in order to design the appropriate policies to enable and regulate them. And there is ample room for all public sectors to embrace technology so as to achieve higher productivity and efficiency, and so I can go on. I also want to say that along this vein, social media has also considerably shifted the way in which people communicate. Instant messaging, as you are aware, allows the transfer of text, audio, and video. And it's a powerful tool of communication between government and citizens. And it also makes the environment in which we operate more complex. It could be more difficult or more exciting, depending on how we respond to it. And many government and public agencies now have social media accounts, but I'm not going to focus on that. So let me just go to what's been in the local media over the past days, in case you think that this is just poppycock. If you've read Business Day yesterday, the Business Day was talking about the impact of technology and artificial intelligence on the medical profession and medical technology. As a matter of fact, the article spoke about the fact that Google has developed AI technology that's even more accurate than technology used by doctors at this point in time, where through testing they've discovered that 3 doctors were unable to detect lung cancer that was picked up by this technology. And they were able to detect, this technology detects it a year earlier. And it allows for intervention that's life-saving. So it's not as though this is far-fetched, and it's not as though medical technology is outside of the arena of the public sector. Because again, as I said in the beginning, we don't want this to be about creating a society of gods and men, where only those who can afford this technology will have access to it. We do want to make it by the people, for the people. So maybe I should conclude with 2 points. And the one point I'd like to make is again a point made by Harari, where he spoke about chess. And you know, the biggest issue was when Kasparov, the world champion, the Russian, was beaten by artificial intelligence, by technology. But that wasn't even seen as a turning, not Kasparov. You know, when Deep Blue defeated Kasparov. But that wasn't even the biggest turning point. The biggest moment thereafter was when, on December 7th, 2017, it was reflected that a milestone was reached when Google AlphaZero program was defeated the Stockfish 8 program. And because Stockfish 8 was the computer chess champion for 2016. And what was happening was that the human artificial intelligence, what is happening to the human artificial intelligence world computer chess champion teams may happen down the road to human artificial intelligence teams in policing, medicines, and banking. So this is the issue that's coming up. And I can tell you, serving on the board of one of the largest banks in South Africa, and on the continent as well, Standard Bank, the banks are seriously looking at automation and AI. And they're looking at the use of cloud for storage, but also at reinventing themselves so that they don't become obsolete. And against that background, I want to say to this community of practice, you should also look at how you need to reinvent yourselves to make a difference. Because at the end of the day, ubiquitous mobile supercomputing, intelligent robots, self-driving cars, neurotechnological brain enhancement, genetic editing. This is the evidence, as Klaus Schwab said, of the dramatic change all around us. Where do we fit in this? What difference do we make? So that's the one point I want to make. The second point I want to make, which shows that the public sector is not way behind, and this goes back to the Constitution I quoted earlier, when I quoted Section 195, and this is Section 195G. It says, transparency must be fostered by providing the public with timely, accessible, and accurate information, close quotes. And this is happening, and South Africa has even been acknowledged for this globally. In 2010, South Africa ranked first out of 92 countries, scoring 92% in a global independent open budget survey assessment of transparent budgeting. This survey is done once every 2 years. It looks at increased public participation in budgeting, and this is gaining momentum, not only in South Africa but globally. Through this process, South Africans are invited to scrutinize budget information and provide opinions on government service delivery. And the estimates of national expenditure publication describes in detail government's expenditure plans over a 3-year cycle. So you see, it's not far-fetched. It's there. And we need to look at how we use this to ensure that the fourth industrial revolution belongs to the people. But the people who are going to make that happen includes the people in this room. And you can be excited about it. You can initiate it. You can be the disruptors with your students. You can make the change and come with the solutions required and make the impossible things happen. And go back and read every budget speech, vote speech that was made in public administration over the past 25 years. Look out for the repetition. Look out for the gaps. Look at those parts that were forward-looking and ask yourselves, where does SAPM fit in? Where are the academics in this space? What is the research we are involved in? And our research won't only be at the level of public administration and management. It will also be in the sectors, as I've noted, coming through some of the papers being presented at the SAPM meeting. But I think in every presentation, let's push the boundaries and say, are we closing the chasm? Are we going to make sure that in Madiba's words, when he during his inauguration speech, towards the conclusion, when he said, and I quote, "Let there be work, bread, water, and salt for all," close quotes. But we must understand the world of work is not as we see it today and yesterday. The salt and bread, water, and salt will also have to come in different ways, and where will the budget come from? And hence there's the discussion on a basic income grant. And mind you, this discussion is not being led by left parties only. It's not being led by social democrats and social democratic governments only. It's even being led by the private sector. And it's being led and now taking root in the Silicon Valley, in the US. And it's because they realize that there may be a need to look at taxation in a different way and taxing the very companies, these AI-related companies, and ensuring that that money comes back to the citizenry. But we need to think ahead and see how we do it. And let the valleys, the savanna valleys of Africa, come up with the debates and views to find the answers to these questions. So I think I've left enough questions and thoughts with you. I think I should pause at this point in time and say thank you very much.